I'll let him tell you more about himself. Please welcome Reverend Ray Gaffney.
Sisters and brothers, it's a real privilege to be here and a real privilege to be asked to speak to you this afternoon, and I hope I won't keep you too long. I also had another privilege in 2004 of being invited by a Shia friend of mine to visit with him Iraq and to go to Karbala at the time of Ashura. We went together as pilgrims, Christian and Muslim together, and we went there also to see what had happened after the invasion and the occupation of Iraq and the fall of Saddam. And there I discovered lots. I heard lots of stories, and I heard lots about the power of your faith. I heard lots about the power of your faith to hold people up in facing adversity, of sanctions, of war, of oppression under the Saddam Hussein regime. And I heard particularly one story that I want to share with you this morning. I heard many amazing stories, but I want to share with you one story this afternoon. That was of a young man who at the time, in the 80s was a young man, he was now in his 40s when I met him, a man called Keith, who had been arrested because he was a member of the wrong political party. He was suspected of being a member of the Dawa party. And he was arrested, and along with others, they were imprisoned in a torture chamber. A torture chamber that was actually, in fact, at one time, my companion's wife's family home that had been turned into a torture chamber. And Keith was arrested and taken there and tortured brutally tortured as a young man. And he was on his last legs. He talked about the fact that his arms were ridiculously swollen. His hands were like elephant's feet. He said they looked ridiculous. If it wasn't so awful, it would be comic, he said. And he still had the scars on his arms 20 years later. And this man said that he was being tortured and he was being brutalized, and he was trying to be forced to spy on the other prisoners. And he refused, and he was thrown into a cell and to be left for dead. And he went into unconsciousness. And during that time of unconsciousness, he had a dream. He had a dream that he was in the shrine of Imam Hussain. The shrine of Imam Hussain. And two scholars were at the front, had left the front and came towards him. One held some grapes in his hand, and one held some dates. And Keith, at this time, before he had lost consciousness, was just thirsting. He hadn't had water for 24 hours. He was thirsting. He had had no food for many days, and he was thirsting. And Keith said, I didn't like dates. I didn't like grapes. I don't like them. But he took, in his dream, he took a date and put it in his mouth. And he soon awoke. And he awoke and felt that his despair had ceased. He was still in pain, but he felt that he could carry on. And the spirit of Imam Hussain had given him the spirit to carry on and to stand up to those who were torturing him and to refuse to bow down to them. And he lived to tell the tale, to tell me the tale. As a young man, his faith had given him the strength to resist oppression, as was said at the beginning, as Gandhi said, to be victorious even though he was oppressed. And I want to share with you another story of another young person, a woman called Sophie Scholl. Sophie, I never had the opportunity of meeting Sophie. Sophie was a young German woman who in 1942-43, at the tender age of 19, realized all around her what was going on was lies. Realized as a young Christian woman that she had to do something about it. And she and some friends of hers did not pick up the gun, did not pick up the sword, but they picked up the pen. And they started writing against the Nazi regime. They started writing leaflets against the Nazi regime, putting them in envelopes, looking through a directory and just picking out addresses and sending them around. At a time when there was a totalitarian regime in Germany and anybody was stepping out of line, they found a way of resisting that was true to their faith and was true to themselves. And they got bolder. They started putting posters up on walls. They started fly posting what they were saying about why Hitler was wrong, and why he was wrong because he was wrong and why they felt he was wrong from their Christian faith. And eventually they got too bold, and they dropped some leaflets in the university and got caught by the curator. And they were taken. And these young people who felt because of their faith they needed to resist the oppression of the Nazi regime were tried quickly and had their heads chopped off. And Sophie, just before she was taken to be executed, met with her parents, and her mother said to her, "I am proud of you. Remember Jesus." Again, like with Keys, her faith had given her the inspiration to actually resist oppression even unto death. And we stand here together as people of faith. We stand here together as people of faith who know that the truth of our faith are not about palaces, are not about presidents, are not about emperors, are not about dictators, but are about those who, sometimes completely, seemingly against the odds, in the Spirit of God, in the Spirit of the one who made us, resist oppression and stand up for justice and for truth, even to the point of death. And that's the best of our humanity. That's what lies at the heart of our humanity, that we can sacrifice ourselves for the noble truth of God, the God of love, who himself gave himself in order that we might even exist, gave us the gift of life. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Reverend. Now, last speech for today is by Mahmoud Dala. Mahmoud Dala is from the Al-Mahdi Institute, and he's currently doing a PhD